On January 1st, 1991, fireworks echoed across St. John's, Newfoundland. The city was welcoming a new year, and for most people, the night carried the familiar feeling of celebration and relief. Inside a modest home on James Place, Catherine Carroll was alone. While the rest of the city looked forward, something inside that house was already going terribly wrong. Earlier that night, Catherine's son, Gregory Parsons, had been somewhere else entirely. 19 years old, he was celebrating New Year's Eve at his girlfriend Tina's family home. Just after midnight, he picked up the phone and called his mother to wish her a happy new year. There was nothing unusual about the call, no argument, no tension. Just a brief conversation before he returned to the evening's celebrations. Several hours later, around 4 a.m, Tina's father drove Gregory back to his apartment. The streets were quiet, and nothing about the drive suggested that anything was wrong. Gregory went inside, closed the door behind him, and went to sleep, unaware that his mother was already dead. Throughout the next day, Gregory tried calling Catherine. The phone rang, but no one answered. He tried again later, and then again, but each call ended the same way. As the hours passed, the silence began to feel wrong. By the evening of January 2nd, concern had turned into dread. That night, Gregory and Tina drove to Catherine's home to check on her. The house was dark, and the front door was locked. Gregory called out, but there was no response. Unable to get inside, he climbed through a ground-level window and entered the house. Upstairs, in the bathroom, he found his mother lying on the floor. Blood covered the room. Catherine Carroll had been stabbed dozens of times. Gregory stumbled back downstairs and called 911, his voice shaking as he told the operator that he had just found his mother's body. Police arrived quickly and began processing the scene. Almost immediately, investigators focused on what they believed was a crucial detail. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing appeared broken or disturbed. To police, that suggested the killer had been someone Catherine knew, someone comfortable inside the home. The autopsy revealed the extent of the violence. Catherine had been stabbed 53 times with a serrated knife. There was no evidence of sexual assault, leading investigators to believe the attack had been fueled by anger rather than desire. Blood and water patterns in the bathroom suggested the killer had showered after the attack, while Catherine's body remained on the floor. As police dug into Catherine's life, they learned she was a single mother who had struggled with alcoholism and mental health issues. Gregory had grown up in the house, and in recent years, he and his friends had often spent time in the basement, drinking beer, listening to heavy metal music, and recording songs with their band. One of those friends was Brian Doyle. When police interviewed him, he described violent arguments between Gregory and his mother. He also told investigators about a song the band had written, a song with a disturbing title, "Kill Your Parents." From that moment on, the direction of the investigation narrowed. Gregory Parsons had no alibi for much of January 1st. There was no forensic evidence tying him to the crime, but police believed they understood his motive. 8 days after Gregory discovered his mother's body, he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. At trial, prosecutors presented no DNA evidence and no physical proof linking Gregory to the bathroom where his mother died. Instead, they relied heavily on a recording of the band's song. The implication was clear. The jury convicted Gregory of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. The case did not end there. On appeal, the conviction was overturned, and Gregory was released on bail after serving 68 days behind bars. Before a new trial could begin, advances in DNA testing allowed previously untested blood samples from the crime scene to be analysed. The results were definitive. The blood did not belong to Gregory Parsons. In November 1998, prosecutors formally declared Gregory innocent. After 7 years under suspicion, his name was cleared. Police reopened the investigation and began searching for the unknown male whose DNA had been left at the scene. More than 150 people were tested without success. Then an anonymous tip directed investigators towards someone from Gregory's past, Brian Doyle. By then, Doyle had moved out of the province. Unable to locate him, police obtained DNA from a relative. The results showed a familial match to the unknown DNA from the crime scene. Police eventually tracked Doyle to Ontario and placed him under surveillance. When he discarded a cigarette, officers collected it. The DNA matched perfectly. Instead of arresting him immediately, police launched an undercover operation designed to elicit a confession. Doyle was slowly drawn into a fake criminal organization and became eager to prove his loyalty. In a recorded meeting with undercover officers posing as crime bosses, he described the murder of Catherine Carroll in graphic detail. He spoke about the knife, the bathroom, and the attack itself, sharing details only the killer could know. In 2001, Brian Doyle was arrested and returned to Newfoundland and Labrador. He confessed to the murder and led police to the knife used in the attack. In 2002, more than a decade after Catherine Carroll was killed, Doyle pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Gregory Parsons walked free, but the damage was permanent. He went on to become a firefighter, a husband, and a father, while continuing to advocate for the wrongfully accused. The justice system later acknowledged its failures through inquiries, apologies, and compensation, but nothing could undo what had already been taken. While the city celebrated the arrival of 1991, time stopped inside a bathroom on James Place. It would take 10 years for the truth to surface, and even longer for the damage to fade. For Catherine Carroll and her family, the new year never truly began. On New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1969, the small town of Clarksville, Pennsylvania, was quiet. Most homes were settling in for the night, preparing to close out the decade and welcome a new year. Inside one house, Joseph Jock Yablonsky was home with his wife Margaret and their daughter Charlotte. There were no celebrations planned, just a family together, unaware that the night would be their last. Earlier that year, Yablonsky had made himself a dangerous man. For decades, he had worked inside the United Mine Workers Union, climbing its ranks and advocating for safer conditions, fairer elections, and accountability. By 1969, he had done something no one else had dared to do in 40 years. He challenged the sitting president of the union, Tony Boyle. The union was already fractured. Miners were angry, disillusioned, and increasingly vocal. Strikes broke out without authorization. Grievances went unanswered. Many believed Boyle cared more about mine owners than the men underground. Yablonsky promised reform, democracy, and transparency, and for that, he quickly became a threat. The election was held in December. Boyle won by a wide margin. Yablonsky conceded publicly, but privately, he refused to let the matter die. He filed formal complaints with the Department of Labor, alleging fraud, intimidation, and misuse of union funds. He also launched multiple civil lawsuits. He was no longer just a rival, he was a liability. Behind the scenes, the hostility had already escalated. Months earlier, after a heated confrontation at union headquarters, Boyle had demanded that Yablonsky be killed. The plan was delayed until after the election to avoid suspicion. Multiple attempts failed, but the order remained. On the night of December 31st, 3 men arrived at the Yablonsky home. They were not strangers to violence. They entered quietly and moved through the house. Jock Yablonsky, his wife Margaret, and their 25-year-old daughter Charlotte were shot as they slept. The killers made no effort to spare anyone. When they left, the house was silent. The bodies were not discovered until January 5th, 1970, when Yablonsky's son, Kenneth, arrived to check on the family. Inside, he found all 3 dead. News spread quickly. Across coal country, shock turned to fury. Within days, investigators identified the gunman. The crime scene was riddled with fingerprints. The killers were arrested almost immediately. As the investigation deepened, a larger conspiracy emerged. Money had been funneled through union officials. Orders traced upward. The trail led back to the highest levels of the United Mine Workers. The murders did not silence Yablonsky's cause. Instead, they ignited it. Thousands of miners walked off the job in protest. Reformers gathered in basements and union halls, determined to finish what Yablonsky had started. His sons took up the legal fight. pushing the election fraud case forward even after his death. Federal investigators flooded the Union. The Department of Labor, aided by the FBI, uncovered widespread corruption. In 1972, the courts overturned the 1969 election. A new vote was ordered under federal supervision. This time, a reform candidate won. Tony Boyle was indicted in 1973. In 1974, he was convicted of orchestrating the murders of Joseph, Margaret, and Charlotte Yablonsky. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms. He would die in prison. The Union was forced to change. Democratic elections were restored. Oversight increased. Safety reforms followed. None of it came soon enough for the Yablonsky family. Jock Yablonsky never lived to see the transformation he fought for. His death became a warning about unchecked power and a reminder of the cost of challenging it. While the rest of the country rang in a new decade, 3 lives ended in silence, marking one of the darkest chapters in American labor history. In the early hours of New Year's Day, January 1st, 1998, the Marlborough Sounds were calm. The water lay dark and glassy between the inlets, disturbed only by the slow movement of anchored boats rocking gently in place. Hours earlier, the area had been loud with music and voices as hundreds of people celebrated the arrival of the new year at Furneaux Lodge. By now, the noise was fading. Lights were going out, one by one. Ben Smart was 21 years old. Olivia Hope was 17. They had spent the night moving through the celebration with friends, drifting between boats and dockside conversations, surrounded by people they trusted. As the night thinned and exhaustion set in, they made their way back toward the yacht Olivia had arrived on earlier that evening. When they reached it, their bunks were gone. Other partygoers had already claimed the space. With nowhere to sleep and dawn still hours away, they hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Just before 4 a.m, they boarded a passing water taxi. There were other passengers on board, including a man they didn't know. He was quiet but confident, and at some point during the ride, he offered them a place to stay aboard his boat. It was nearby, he said, just for the night. The offer didn't feel alarming. In the half-light of early morning, surrounded by water and celebration, it sounded like a simple solution. The water taxi pulled alongside a vessel in the darkness. Ben and Olivia stepped off. The engine pulled away. The lights faded. That moment marked the last confirmed sighting of Ben Smart and Olivia Hope. As morning arrived, the boats remained where they were. Celebration debris drifted in the water. People woke slowly, some with headaches, others with little memory of the night before. But Ben and Olivia didn't return. They didn't answer calls. By January 2nd, concern had turned into alarm. Police initially treated the case as a disappearance, but almost immediately, something felt wrong. Friends and family described the pair as responsible and close-knit. They wouldn't have vanished without telling someone. Searches began across the surrounding inlets, shorelines, and open water. Nothing surfaced. Days passed, then weeks. Boats were examined. Witnesses were interviewed. The case shifted from hopeful to grim. Investigators began working under the assumption that Ben and Olivia were no longer alive. Attention quickly turned to the water taxi driver, Guy Wallace, the last known person to see them. Wallace described the man who took the pair onto his boat. He was scruffy, with dark hair and facial stubble. But Wallace was certain about one detail above all others. The boat had 2 masts. He described it as a wooden ketch, well maintained, with distinct features. He even sketched it for police. But as investigators combed the inlet, they could not find such a vessel. Instead, police seized a single-mast steel yacht belonging to a man named Scott Watson. Watson lived nearby. He had a criminal record from his teenage years, though nothing recent. His boat, named Blade, did not match Wallace's description. It had 1 mast, not 2. No wooden hull, no portholes. Still, police believed Watson stood out. As the investigation continued, Watson became the focus. His name appeared in the media before he was arrested. His criminal history was discussed openly. Rumors spread through the small town of Picton, then across the country. Watson was advised not to speak publicly. The silence only deepened suspicion. Wallace was shown photo montages. At first, he did not recognize anyone. Later, he was shown a different photograph of Watson, altered in a subtle way he did not realize. This time, Wallace said the eyes looked familiar, though other features did not align with his memory. That image would later be called the blink photo. Months after the disappearance, Watson was arrested. At trial, the Crown presented a sweeping circumstantial case. Nearly 500 witnesses were called. There were no bodies, no fingerprints belonging to Ben or Olivia on Watson's boat, no blood, no direct forensic link placing them aboard Blade. Instead, the prosecution relied heavily on 2 prison informants who claimed Watson confessed while on remand, and on a small number of human hairs found on a blanket aboard his yacht. The jury heard the evidence as conclusive. They did not hear that one informant would later admit he lied. They did not hear that the other had received benefits from police for his testimony. They did not hear how contested the hair evidence would become, or how contamination was a real possibility. In September 1999, Scott Watson was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. In the years that followed, the case refused to settle. Witnesses recanted. Experts challenged the forensic analysis. The water taxi driver maintained he had been pressured and misled. Olivia Hope's father publicly expressed discomfort with the way the case had been prosecuted, saying he was not convinced the truth had ever fully emerged. Appeals were filed, reviews were ordered, new testing raised new doubts. Still, the conviction stood. More than 2 decades later, the Marlborough Sounds remain unchanged. Boats continue to anchor in the same inlets. New Year's Eve celebrations still fill the water with light and noise. But somewhere between those hours of darkness and dawn, 2 young lives disappeared, and certainty about what happened to them never fully returned. For Ben Smart and Olivia Hope, the new year never truly began. And for everyone left behind, January 1st remains unfinished. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this New Year's episode. If you enjoyed the video, consider hitting the like button and subscribing so you don't miss what's coming next. I upload new stories every week, and as the year moves forward, there are plenty more ahead. Thanks for spending part of the start of the year here with me, and I'll see you in the next one.